well. Then that one play happened, and then you couldn't calm them down after that.
Tell me about Jalen Milroe's mental and physical shape going into this game. You've been around him this off week now. He's really close with you. Where's the mindset of QB1 for this team heading to Baton Rouge?
His mindset is exactly where it needs to be, and that's on winning the game. That's on helping us get better. That's on helping himself getting better.
It is Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard, brought to you by mybookie.ag. Remember, they will double that initial deposit when you put in that code next round at mybookie.ag. For Monday Night Football with the Bucs and the Chiefs, college hoops all over the place, even the presidential election up and available tomorrow for you at mybookie.ag. We will not get into politics here, Brock. We will.
No, we wont.
We will, though, immediately get into the Oregon Ducks because I'm telling you, man, I had a great Saturday again, 6-3 on the college football Saturday. Should have been 7-2 because if Sherrone Moore, who has struggled so much, 5-4 now, all 4 losses by double digits, if he's not using his time out there, Dan Lanning doesn't need to try to punch it in. My opinion, should have been a 14-point game. I should have got home with the cover plus 14.5, but Lanning, I was told today, does this or that and lets his team dictate whether or not they're going to run it up on somebody. He is going to be really, really difficult to handle if he ever wins a championship. With all that said, Oregon, pretty good team. I thought their best performance was last week against Illinois, the most, at least complete performance, and really could have won that game going away. They kind of pulled back in the second half. But overall, the Oregon Ducks with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, they've got a ton of skill. The defense is better than advertised. Are they the best team in college football?
Yeah, I think they are. And they were the unanimous AP choice. And I think when the rankings come out tomorrow, they will be the unanimous number one. I don't think that's too terribly difficult. They have faced, I think, a few things, Lance, jump out. And I've seen them a couple times in person, which always helps, right, to really dig into them. And for me, have kind of a case study with film at just a deeper level when you cover them in person. But they really do not have, unlike a lot of the different teams in college football, they don't have a fatal flaw. They're not my Seattle Seahawks offensive line, which is an anchor that is totally wrecking this season and wrecked them yesterday against your Rams, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But they don't have a fatal flaw. They've cleaned up their offensive line. I think early in the year, they tried to go with a walk-on center to keep the big guy at guard and just kind of felt like that was their best 5. Eventually, they moved the big guy to center and they get some guys back from injury. That thing is totally settled down. They're 3 or 4 deep at tight end. They're 4 or 5 deep at receiver. They're 2 deep at running back. Defensive line, has got dudes upon dudes, transfers that have come in from different schools that gives them not just 4 starters, but 5, 6. They've got 3 or 4 linebacker. I mean, they've got multiple corners and safeties. So there's just not a spot on that roster that you look at and say, whew, this is an area they've got to protect. And I think just about every other team in college football has some area of their team that we've got to make sure this team doesn't lose it for us. I don't think they do. And I think that's why they've shown up against, Ohio State at home, an Illinois team that's physical, out on the road against Michigan, have just kind of handled all the diversity of scheme and style and personnel that's come at them. And oh, by the way, a really veteran quarterback that's been there and done it and playing like a seasoned pro. So yeah, man, they're going to be the team to beat moving forward, and I don't think there's any question about it.
This is going to help me with my transition into upsets and where we are right now in college football, and some massive upsets again this past weekend. But when you look at the remainder of this Oregon Ducks schedule, they've got Maryland at home. They've got to go to Camp Randall to take on Wisconsin, and then they've got your Huskies in Eugene to kind of shut down the season, at least the regular season. I don't know how you feel about this. If that game was in Husky Stadium, maybe. Wisconsin, if things break right and they're +3 in turnovers, outside of that, I mean, there's not really a losable game, is there?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. And after losing 3 times, Dan Lanning's lost 5 games, I believe, there in 3 years, and 3 of them have been to the Huskies. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a different attention to detail, and the fact that we'll be in their building to close it all out. Yeah, I think that will be a tall, tall task and tall duty. And yeah, there's just you know what else they've done, Lance, really, really well. And I texted you before the show today, and so I want to make sure we kind of dig in on them because I'm sure you folks in SEC country and everybody else that tunes into your guys' program, does look at them, and the ratings show that. I mean, Lance, the ratings show that the South and the Rust Belt and the country watches the Oregon Ducks because they know, man, the way this thing is built, as I said earlier, feels fairly sustainable. But I'll tell you what Dan Lanning has done really well, and I think taking a page out of his time with Kirby and Nick Saban, and that is even though we've got a lot of means and even though we've got a lot of resources, we are not just going to be in the free agent pay world. We're not going to build a dream team through free agency. We're going to build it first and foremost through high school recruiting. And that is what is paying these kind of dividends, right? That is why you have depth on the O-line. That is why you have depth on the defensive line. That is why you have depth at wide receiver and tight end. These are not all portal free agent. Let's bring in 50 guys because we can. And their checkbook could allow them to do that. If they wanted to go and sign 25 guys and pay them all top dollar, they could do that. But I think the number was somewhere around 11 or 12 that they brought in via free agency. And oh, by the way, put together a top 5 high school recruiting class, and they will continue to do that. And the rest of the West Coast and the rest of everybody west of the Rocky Mountains, as long as Dan and company stay there, and I don't know why he would look to leave as he's turned down many overtures over the last couple of years. As long as they continue to do that, they are going to be a tough out for years to come.
No Michigan, no Florida State, no USC in the top 25, but you have Indiana, BYU, SMU, Iowa State, Army, Washington State, Colorado, Pittsburgh, even Vanderbilt. It has been an insane 2024, and we've still got a month to go. More upsets this past week, and really the Big 12. Things really opened up when Iowa State lost, when Kansas State lost. Then you go to the ACC. I had these ridiculous scenarios that I gave you last week. Well, wonder if SMU has one loss and one loss Clemson and undefeated Miami. And in the Big 12, well, wonder if you have undefeated Iowa State and undefeated BYU. All those scenarios are now gone because we got the big upsets over the weekend. I'm liking the new era that we're in college football. I think there are probably some internal problems when you talk about authority and guys being unable to coach the way they really want to coach. As far as like discipline and just being hard on these players, because obviously these guys can take off. But the results we're getting on the field week in, week out, where you've got these upsets, you have so many teams that are still in the mix to get to a college football playoff. I think it's been amazing.
I do too, and I was probably one of the louder voices that had some real frustration with, first and foremost, the disintegration of a conference of champions. That was really hard for me to absorb. With all of that movement. Also, I've been one that's been fairly critical of these multiple transfers. I'm all for grad transfers. I'm all for a one-time transfer, but the multiple transfers to be at 3 or 4 schools, linebacker bless his heart, who's a really good player at Houston Batten. I think this is his 4th or 5th stop. I mean, it's just been a remarkable, winding, crazy, crazy road. And good for him. He's found some gold at the end of this crazy rainbow journey. But what we're seeing on the positive side, the positive unintended consequence is a leveling of the playing field. That these guys that were backups at Georgia or at Auburn or at Michigan or at a power program who looked at it and said, man, there's just not going to be as much opportunity. Let me go transfer and I'll have a chance to start in many of those schools that you just rattled off. These aren't 3rd and 4th and 5th string cast-offs. These aren't guys that have flunked out of school. These aren't character issues. These are guys that are right there on the cusp, as backups, but just are blocked in front of them. And now, boy, I can go here and be a starter. Or at Indiana, I can follow my coach, 13 of them starters from James Madison on a really good team, and prove to the country that, hey man, it wasn't just because we were James Madison. We are really good players. So yeah, it's been phenomenal, and it's only going to peak and crescendo at a playoff that I think is going to be unbelievably wide open. Yeah, there's still the power brokers. Yes, there's still in Oregon, Ohio State, these rosters that, are going to be better than the 12 seed or the 8 seed that they face. But man, 5 through 12 in this playoff is going to be some kind of phenomenal football.
You kind of hinted at one of the things you didn't like was maybe the demise of the conference championship, and I want to go a little deeper. You know, my favorite weekend, or one of my favorite weekends, was always the SEC championship game over in Atlanta. We'd go do the show on a Friday. Then we would do an early Saturday show. We'd go to the game. We'd go to a big dinner. It was just a lot of excitement because typically that was a play-in game. Back when we had the BCS, one of those two teams was going to play for the national championship, and the winner was definitely getting in the 4 team. Now, I go back to Dallas, SEC Media Days in July, and I brought this up to Greg Sankey, the commissioner. I said, you're going to have a handful of 10-2s at the end of the season. What are you going to do about it? He kind of scoffed and was kind of grumpy about it, really didn't want to answer it. And I said, where we are in today's football, and especially in the SEC, it's more of an NFL model. You're going to have a lot of these 10-2s. And here's what's interesting. If you really start to dissect the SEC schedule, there's a good chance 6 teams will be 10-2. And if I'm one of those 10-2s, back to your conference championship, I don't want to go to Atlanta. I would rather sit on the outside, let somebody from that committee say, damn, they've had a hell of a season in the SEC. They've got 2 or 3 top 25 wins. They're in, instead of being the 10-2 that goes and loses that game and gets that 3rd loss, and then they're punished. Ultimately, do you see it playing out like that? And what does the committee do in that situation to a team that, you know, they've got the honor of representing their conference, but at the same time, if they lose that game, then they're out and the other team's in that didn't even play? Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. That'd be hard to absorb. And I appreciate you making me sound smart. I actually said the demise of the Conference of Champions. Oh. Okay, Bill Walton's Conference of Champions, the demise of the great Pac-12. But you know what? You spun it in. No, but the pro that you are, Lance, you spun it to even a better conversation, because that one's like dead. It's done. It's in the sea. It's floated away. It's never to be had again. Well, that's not fair. There's going to be a new Pac-12.
There is.
It's just going to look and feel different. But to your point, each of those committee members is going to have to make that decision. For me, in my house, if I was sitting on that and I'm a 10-2 team that plays in that championship, and I don't know, I play a hard-fought game and we end up losing, we're 10-3, I would sure hope, and I would stand on that table and say, I'm taking this 10-3 team over that 10-2 team, especially if they beat them head-to-head. There is no way in good faith and in good conscience I could take a team that had to play another game against another quality opponent and loses it, and just because they've got a 3 next to their name, if they beat that 10-2, which is also likely with all those numbers that you just referenced, that's more than likely to have happened, that team beat that team head-to-head in season, and to me, that's got to be more than that number 3 on the loss column.
Look, you played the quarterback position at a high level, both in the Pac-12 and in the NFL. And when you throw 3 interceptions and you're able to win a game, I think it shows you that you've got really good parts around you. You've got a really good defense. But Carson Beck now is the 4th player in the last 20 years to throw 3 or more picks in back-to-back games and win both of those games. He cannot continue to do this. They were fortunate that DJ Lagway went out of that game. Florida was leading that game. I think Florida would have had opportunities to win that game against Georgia. Now they go to Oxford. They're only a 2.5-point favorite. If they turn it over multiple times in Oxford, they're going to lose that game. It's just, just the way it is. I did not see Carson Beck playing this bad. When you watch Carson Beck now with 11 interceptions, what is wrong with him?
Yeah, there's this line that you walk as a quarterback where you think, okay, I do have such a supporting cast around me, Lance, and I've got such a tremendous defense that it does. There's a golf course out in Washington. It's called Echo Falls. And Echo Falls has got a lot of elevation change. So the governor on that golf cart is strong. Even if you want to zoom down that hill, you can't, because it's just and it's just it's grabbing. They've had enough accidents through the years that they've turned up whatever that governor is on those golf carts to 100. And when you look at the other side of it with Carson Beck, it's like, oh man, I got such an unbelievable defense. I can give not that he's trying to give the ball away, but some of that judgment, some of that risk taking, some of that governor is, man, it has got to tighten up here in the second half. It's got to tighten up in Oxford. It's got to tighten up down the stretch. It's got to tighten up if they get to that SEC title game, because you're right, you just can't give away that many possessions and put your defense in that kind of bind over and over and over again, and especially as the competition gets better. And oh, by the way, I think Jackson Dart heard everybody that was all upset about him trick-or-treating and all of his loss of focus, and went out there and just shoved it right down their throat and played the best game, certainly of that offense. Something that we were, I think, many of us expecting to see more consistently, but seems to be finding it at exactly the right time.
At any level, have you gone 515 and 6 touchdowns?
Say that again?
Have you ever done what Jackson Dart did this past Saturday?
5 or 6 touchdowns and no picks. Ooh, yeah, I'm in high school. Definitely ran
Over
it up
500
on the
yards
Park
passing?
Warriors, the Spanaway like Sentinels. No, not 500 yards. Coach Huard would not allow that kind of act. No, he would not do that. He would not totally humiliate and punish an opponent.
Would he have
on the other side.
would he have taken a knee in the big house Saturday instead of punching in a meaningless touchdown to go up 21?
Yes.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Okay, so
those things can come back. Those things come back and get you every once in a while.
So we've kind of had fun with this over the last few weeks, but I've said, like, there's nobody but Diego Pavia that has to be the first team All-SEC quarterback because you haven't had elite quarterback play. Ewers has struggled. Nico struggled. We just talked about Carson Beck.
Jalen struggled.
Yeah, I mean, all these guys, Jackson Dart, struggled just a couple of weeks ago. Look, great game here. But first team, I was saying it's Diego Pavia. Another win for him. I finally found out, and I said this earlier on the next round, and I think with you being a kid of the 80s, you're going to like this. Do you remember the movie Twins?
Oh, yeah. Danny and Arnold? Who doesn't?
Okay, so Diego is DeVito Tebow. So when you look at him, he doesn't have any muscle definition. He's got a little bit of the look in his face, but this is Danny DeVito to Arnold Schwarzenegger. So Tebow was the Schwarzenegger. This is the Danny DeVito. So DeVito Tebow is what I've got.
No, I think that's got a good little rhyme to it. I would also say some William Wallace. I mean, he can blow lightning bolts right out of his arse. He can. And he's not, seven
Has he ever had a kilt
tall.
on, though?
I don't know. I could see him rocking that, though. He's got the confidence to do so. You know what he is doing, what all those other guys that you mentioned in the conference just have not, and certainly have not done consistently. And I was chatting with a guy, I think from the New York Times or one of the bigger publications that's putting out a New York Post, putting out a piece for the upcoming QB draft and just kind of optics here at the halfway point a couple weeks ago. And one of my biggest optics always, Lance, through the years, and it's not rocket science, but it can be hard to evaluate and project in the NFL. And that is, how much do you elevate everybody around you? William Wallace took a bunch of these just scoundrels, took a bunch of these normals, and he made them feel like they were 7 foot tall. Like, I got to follow this guy. And that is what Diego is doing at a place that it's never been done before. Not at that position, not collectively beating Auburn, Alabama in the same year. Are you kidding me? But he does. He just has this. He's just got this self-confidence and this belief. And I know I've told you the story about my older brother with Tom Brady, and it's kind of cool whenever I'm with Damon and we're at a charity event or we're in a fishing boat or we're hanging out somewhere, and inevitably it comes back to, okay, tell me about Tom. What was he really like? What was it behind the scenes? And Brady tells, Damon and Drew Bledsoe in the locker room there at the Superdome before their first Super Bowl, right, against the greatest show on turf. And it's a longer pregame and everything else. And Tom turns to Damon and Drew and like, can you believe it, man? In 4 hours, we're going to be world champs. Like, in 4 hours, we're going to be right back here celebrating the New England Patriots being Super Bowl champions. And Damon and Drew look at each other like, we are. Because he's not just saying it, like every fiber of his being believes it. Like, he just got that headstrong self-confidence, and he elevated a bunch of really average parts. I mean, that New England team, that offense back then, they were average dudes. Most of those guys went elsewhere. I remember playing with Jermaine Wiggins, a tight end. God bless him, after the fact in Indy, and it was like, you did what? How did you do that in New England? You did that because the QB just elevated everybody and made them feel bigger than life. And that's certainly what Diego's doing in Nashville.
Well, look, you lived this, and I thought that we would never be in a time now where you didn't see elite quarterback play all over the time, because it's 365 days a year, the 7-on-7s, the quarterback coaches. You lived it yourself. Your son Titus is living it right now. But there just hasn't been really great quarterback. And I'm interested to see where that article went on draftable quarterbacks coming this May, because I think Shedeur he seems like a slam dunk guy, but everybody else seems like they've got massive problems, or at least chinks in the armor. Is it more of right now Pat Mahomes is second in the league. He's got more interceptions than touchdown passes. Is it something with offensive lines are just so bad now? They're making these elite quarterbacks look worse, or is it just kind of an off year?
Yeah, I think at the NFL level, these defensive lines are just, yeah, they're ahead. I think the really elite O lines in Philly and in Detroit have certainly made and benefited their quarterbacks immensely. I would put Cam Ward when I had that conversation with this gentleman. It was really to
That's
me
fair.
Cam and Shadeur, and then everybody else. Like Cam and Shadeur are the ones that have elevated. Look at what Shadeur did at Jackson State. Look at what he's doing at Colorado. I mean, taking them to places that they just haven't been. When you look at Cam Ward, what he did at Incarnate Word, what he did at Wazoo, what he's now doing at Miami, it's the same thing. Like, man, when this guy comes on the field, there's something to him. Like he just instills that kind of confidence. And then both of those guys have got pretty unique arms as well. And I think are physical. Like when you see Shadeur Sanders and Cam Ward in person, Lance, you look at them and go, okay, that's a body that's got some durability to it. It's got some availability to it, has over the course of their career everywhere that they have been, even last year, largely for Shadeur behind one of the worst O-lines you're ever going to see. So those two are kind of the cream of the crop. And then, yeah, I don't know. I mean, is Quinn Ewers a first round pick? Is Beck a first round pick? Or some of these other guys that were heralded before the seasons as top 5 can't miss guys? To me, it's those two and everybody else chasing.
It is Unlocked. Fox's Brock Huard. We do this every single week right here. Make sure you go to mybookie.ag. Very important here. Our title sponsor. Put in that code word next round. They're going to double your initial deposit. College hoops starting up right now. You got the NBA, obviously a lot of NFL to go. You can get everything, sides, totals, player props, and the presidential election. Big thing going on in our society tomorrow, Brock, which we will not get into
when
politics.
Is that?
That is tomorrow. I'm sure you probably are. You've already voted, haven't you?
Oh, already voted way long ago.
Okay.
Lance sent that sucker in. We're all done. Can I add one other little layer to this? And maybe this will be something for you and Klatt to discuss in the weeks ahead as well about that QB deal. And is it the O-line or this or that? Kind of like Major League Baseball. And I know it's probably analogous because much like these D lines are so good and O lines have a challenge, the pitching at the major league level is so good, right? I mean, the stuff is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think people to your point, I think people that don't watch Major League Baseball, when they look and they're like, damn, over the last week, this team's hitting 212. That's normal.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff is it's insane and all through bullpens and everything else. But I think where it can be a little analogous to the college game and worth watching is all of these QB gurus, all of these guys that have all these QB coaches, kind of like all these hitters that have all these swing coaches and all this swing analysis and all these tools that you think, oh, this is going to make me that much better. But maybe it's different than what my professional hitting coach is teaching or our professional hitting philosophy. And I don't know, I just had Avery Johnson this week, and this is no shot at his guy out of Wichita that he's worked with since 5th grade. And it's great. It's great to have coaches and it's great to have these gurus. And I don't mean to minimize them at all. And it's great to have swing coaches. They have them in golf. They have them in baseball. It's awesome. If you find somebody that unlocks you and makes you better, that is great, great, great. But I do wonder at times if it is part of the challenge and issue is, hey man, my QB coach is teaching me this. This guy's teaching me that. I'm kind of stuck in between. There's also a lot of this whole QB movement, Lance, if you think about it, from the days of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and these guys throwing over the top, getting on top of I always call it getting on top of a football. And Klatt and I have talked about this a lot. And just the accuracy that it creates from Joe Namath through all the decades of you just think of that traditional, and Russell Wilson, probably the clearest picture of it today, of just getting over the top. Well, what do they teach in a lot of today's game? It's a lot of this rotational. They've gotten away from that, and it's all rotation, and it's torque, and it's more power, and it's this RPO game, and it's throwing it from here and throwing it from here. And I don't know, man. There's part of me that's like, that was pretty tried and true for a lot of decades because they threw it pretty successfully, and Drew Brees and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and these guys were pretty darn good. And this whole revolution to get away from it and do all this horizontal stuff, I don't know. There's, to me, a watch on that over the next few years because it's a phenomenon now that I think maybe in time they'll look back and go, gosh, those core fundamentals of getting my elbow near or above my shoulder, of having that good C grip and ripping that spiral instead of the side army U flicking the ball all over the place. Maybe there is something to that traditional fundamental.
Speaking of tried and true, James Franklin's kryptonite is top 10 teams, and specifically Ohio State. He is now 1-10 against the Buckeyes, 3-18 all-time against top 10s. They were up 10-0. This Ohio State defense doesn't get enough credit, completely shut down Penn State on Saturday. If Will Howard plays clean football, if they can figure out something with that offensive line, I know you said it's Oregon. I believe Ohio State would be the best team in football. I think the offensive line kind of is the difference right now. I know Oregon, probably the one team they don't want to see in the Big Ten championship game is a rematch with Ohio State. When does it get, so a couple of things. How good do you believe this Buckeye team is? And how big of a problem is the offensive line? And then the other thing, is it a mental thing with James Franklin? I know he's losing to really good teams, but sooner or later when you've got like talent and you've got a double-digit lead, you've got to be able to win some of these games.
Yeah, I would have thought this is the one, right? And watching some of the predictions before the game on both the Big Noon and game day and all of that, you just kind of had a lot of the guys, this just feels different, right? Just, over the years, as you looked at that matchup, you had to talk yourself into Penn State being able to beat them. But this was the year where no, Penn State's pretty battle tested. No, they've come back in games. No, this new coordinator's really creative. No, this Drew Aller is different than he was as a first-year starter last year. And he just and a bunch of salty, athletic NFL guys on their defense, it did. And if I was on that set, I'd have probably said the same thing that many of them did. And that was, no, this is the one. This is the one where it just feels different. And then when you're up 10-0 and I head to my game in Houston, I'm like, wow, they're going to find a way. Like, they're going to get over that hump. And they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. And yeah, I think that there is a huge psychology to it until you do it, until you burst through that dam. There is just some of this psychology that you are fighting that, is this going to be the time? Can we do it? Hey, man, you do it. You kind of looking to everybody else to do it instead of you taking charge. And I thought Aller started really hot and then just became like that whole offense, really, really normal. And then you also go back to our comment to start the show about Oregon. Oregon made Ohio State's defense look human. I mean, they went up and down the field and big plays and speed and matchup issues all over the place that Penn State certainly could not do on Saturday.
For Penn State and their players, bigger picture, I mean, this goes back a long time with James Franklin. For USC and Lincoln Riley, though, the 5 losses, again, led your Huskies early. I mean, the mismatch of coaching in that third quarter, I thought was on display, and then it completely got flipped again in the fourth quarter, and USC finds another way to blow a fourth quarter lead. Now they're sitting at 4-5, dead and buried. I'm not making excuses for Lincoln Riley. I do believe if Caleb Williams was their quarterback, they'd be undefeated. I think they would be undefeated right now with Caleb Williams. Yep. I think they're that improved in other aspects. A lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, but still, even with that said, they would be undefeated with Caleb Williams. They've got Miller Moss. He's a good quarterback. He's not even close to what Lincoln Riley has had in the past. But is there something, have you been on one of these teams in one of these seasons where you just can't win a close game and you can't hold on to a lead? And that's got to be something that is real mentally with these players.
Yeah, I have not. High school was one thing we were, always, really, really good. We didn't win state every year by any means, but, those games were that way. College, started out my career on some really talented teams and some really good NFL future players. And what were we, 9-2, 10-2 my first year. Second year, a bunch of us got injured. Did not really have a season like that. My last year, we were not as good a team and barely a 500 team. The NFL, I know personally, as I'm just kind of rattling through there, personally, I never had a season like that. I have covered these teams though, Lance, for years that have. And whether it was Clemson having to get over the top with Dabo, right, and just get over Clemsoning, whether, it was, Nebraska right now that just can't get over these one-score losses, that just can't get to a bowl game, that just can't pass it. Penn State, that just can't get there. Yeah, man, it is some psychological. It is one of those things that you just have to stop. Remember Dabo making a big scene of it? We're just done with Clemsoning. I'm just done with saying that word.
Well, they're not.
We're over it. Well, they won some national titles. They won
did.
a lot of games, and maybe now it's kind of circled back for varying and different reasons. But yeah, I mean, USC has lost 5 games, right? They were 4 games lost by 14. What was this last week? It was a one-score game, right? So 5 games, less than 20 points. I mean, it's crazy. It is just crazy. And Miller Moss is a good QB, but back to, do you elevate everybody around you? Do you create a sense of belief? Do you cut that narrative off? Say what you want about Will Howard, man. He fumbles one away. He throws a pick six. You know what that dude did? Square jawed, shoulders back, chest up. He owns all of it. He sucks it up. He's a tough sucker. And, he really gave and instilled a bunch of confidence in those people around him that we're going to find a way to get this done. And Lincoln had, let's see, Baker do it, Kyler do it, Jalen do it, Caleb do it for the first couple years. And, right now, not to put it all on Miller Moss by any means, but just, having that difference maker at the most important position in sports, obviously a big deal.
It is Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard. It is brought to you by our title sponsor, mybookie.ag. Doesn't matter if it's college hoops, the NFL, sides, player props, totals. They've got it at mybookie.ag. Very important. Mention next round. That's your code word. They're going to double your initial deposit. Very random, but on the other side, I want to get into the most expensive rookie dinner Brock Huard has ever paid for. If, in fact, that is a discussion. We will get into that. Also, Lions, Ravens. Do we have the best 2 teams established in the NFL? We'll get into that as well. It's Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard right here.
Follow Brownie on Twitter and Instagram at ryanbrownlive.
There's only one Champy's world famous fried chicken. Poor boy's tenders, full fried chicken plates, and a little bit of the Mississippi Delta with chicken on a stick and hot tamales. On your way to or from the big game on Highway 119 in Alabaster, stop by Champy's Chicken.
Hey, there's nothing worse than waking up to a plumbing problem. Don't get caught in a flooded house. Call the guys at Hemp Hill Services. Adam, Chad, and the team at Hemp Hill are the only ones I trust to fix it and fix it right the first time. Hemp Hill Services does it right and always at a fair price. For all of your plumbing, cooling, and heating needs, trust the name that Birmingham has trusted since 1954. That is Hemp Hill Services. Call now, 205-229-2090. That's 205-229-2090.
Storm season is here. Make sure you have a plan of action in place right now. Greg from Pell City and Storm Restoration Roofing should be your first call when storms hit. Insurance companies love working with Storm Restoration Roofing because of Greg Nelson's name and reputation in the industry. When storms hit, call Greg Nelson. He's local, 205-542-3531. He's the home of the free no-cost roof inspection. Greg from Pell City on Facebook, 205-542-3531. It's Storm Restoration Roofing.
In some places, football is a sport. In Alabama, it's a fine art. New Life Art is proud to announce Daniel A. Moore's upcoming painting, Deuces Wild. This season, Bama is blessed with a pair of very talented deuces. The pair played a huge role on both sides of the ball in the Tide's amazing 41-34 victory over number 2 Georgia. Deuces Wild will portray the unbelievable game-winning 75-yard touchdown catch by deuce number 1, Ryan Williams, late in the 4th quarter. The Dogs' last chance drive was stopped by deuce number 2, Savion Brown, as he made the game-saving interception in the end zone, which will be celebrated by a small artist's remark in the bottom margin of each print. Go to danielmooreart.com to see the artist's preliminary sketch and take advantage of special pre-publication pricing for Deuces Wild. Also available, The Legend, Daniel Moore's final tribute to Coach Nick Saban. Order now at danielmooreart.com.
Follow Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. The social media team at Next Round Live is dedicated to giving you daily news conferences and practice video from UAB, Alabama, Auburn, and around college football. Follow and compare to the sites you used to visit. You'll also get the latest highlights and news from the Next Round Daily Show. Turn on the notifications so you don't miss a thing. Next Round Live on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. See more at nextroundlive.com.
By now, you guys know how I feel about my fashion. However, did you know that I care about your fashion choices? Cargo shorts are out, flip-flops are only appropriate on the boat, and please throw away that stained t-shirt from college. You may be thinking, EG, that's all I own. What do I do? Here's what you do. Go to nextround.store and fill your cart with a wardrobe that is approved by me. Stock up on logo t-shirts, hoodies for football season, and hats for every day of the week. Trust me on this one and head over to nextround.store to get stocked up for this season.
Just because you've quit going to the gym, it doesn't mean that you have to quit gym altogether. Dunaway, that is. With our Next Round podcasts open 24/7, 365, you can access gym anytime you'd like. While you may have done away with your treadmill routine, our version of Dunaway is standing by ready to get you back to your absolute best. Find all that lovely Jimmy D-led content on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and in the podcast section of nextroundlive.com. This message is sponsored by Jimmy Crypto Inc. and Jimmy Crypto for President.
From the creators of The Next Round comes two new sites, covercrimson.com and thebarnauburn.com. Two team sites with the same excitement and information-driven content that you get every day on The Next Round. Live daily shows, recorded shows, free of charge, plus premium content with insider information starting at just $1. And it's the perfect gift for the Alabama or Auburn fan in your family. Covercrimson.com or thebarnauburn.com. Sign up today.
Start your day online with our website, nextroundlive.com, for the latest videos, podcasts, and college football stories. It's also a great way to stream the show or shop in the Next Round store. Stay connected by visiting nextroundlive.com.
Okay, before we get into the most entertaining game of the weekend, Rams Seahawks, overtime win by the Rams on the road. I did want to bring this up. It's Unlocked. Fox's Brock Huard do it each and every week right here on Disrupt. Brought to you by my friends at mybookie.ag. They will double the initial deposit. When you put in that code next round, that's all you got to do. They will double your initial deposit at mybookie.ag. So go back years and years ago when you're a rookie coming out of Washington. Are the stories true? Did you get drugged to dinners and offensive linemen would just drink bottle after bottle of red wine and just run up steaks and appetizers?
Yeah, not for the 75th pick or 77th pick. I was a third round pick. First round picks, those things could happen. But we did go out my rookie year, QBs, receivers, and there was, I think, a level of responsibility. Thankfully, John Kitna, great dude. And, these receivers and running backs, Ricky Waters, yes, there was Crystal and all this ridiculous stuff. And the bill came, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like insanity. And I forget what it was even at that point. I don't know if it was $5,000, $10,000, whatever it was like all my scholarship checks for 4 years at Washington times 10. So, I had to chip in, but I never got crucified like that. But it is, those things are real. And thankfully Kitna was there because I kind of flirted, Lance. I had a friend, a roommate, and he was cheap. And to me, there's a difference between frugal and cheap. Frugal, I was certainly frugal. There is no question. Grew up poor white trash.
Yeah, you grew up poor white trash. I mean, Mama and Poppy Huard would have died if they would have seen that bill at the restaurant, right?
Oh, I mean, it's just been like, what are we doing? Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, that could feed a family for a year.
We were hand-me-downs. It was milk was our big splurge. Smith Brothers milk got delivered once a week, and man, we were thrilled when that came to the front door. We had like the milk carton thing by the front door. And I was frugal and very, very frugal. Now, my roommate was cheap. And the difference between frugal and cheap is frugal is you doing you. Cheap is when you impact those around you. When you go to a meal and all of a sudden you're the one like adding to that. Well, I didn't order appetizers, so I'm not helping chip in for that. Like, no. Now you're affecting all of us. Yep. Now you're a cheapskate. Don't do that. So thankfully, my wife has helped me in many, many ways, not nearly be as frugal as I would have been had I never met her and married her. So yes, when that dinner at Daniel's Broiler, my rookie year came and that bill came, Kitna and Foley, if they wanted to be jerks, would have made me pay for it, and it would have been just a disaster. But thankfully, we got to go one third.
Okay, I do want to bring this up, and I know we're about to get to the NFL. But just because we've been somewhat hard on Trent Dilfer, I do think it's important to bring up the fact coming out of a bye, they look great this past weekend. It was against Tulsa. I get all that, but still, UAB goes out, they stomp a mud hole in them, And you mentioned Kitna and his kid, Jalen Kitna, 6 touchdown passes. I don't know how much you know about Jalen, but I wanted to go back to John Kitna. He always seemed like a less flashy Ryan Fitzpatrick, just was always competitive, kept you in a game, but was always on bad teams. And I think Kitna might have been a better quarterback than advertised, but he was just always in bad situations. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, I love him. I watched him challenge Mike Holmgren in a meeting in a way that I was like, that is so impressive.
Was it when Holmgren was the offensive coordinator?
No, it was when the Holmgren was head coach.
Oh, at Seattle.
Czar,
okay. Yeah.
GM, president, wannabe owner. And it was, our first year and we're not very good. And oh man, he just tried to destroy John and me to some degree. I think I'd started one game, but John, I mean, it was such a learning lesson to me. Like, no, I'm gonna stand my ground, and I'm gonna let you just totally tear me apart, and then I'm gonna respond, because it was one of those, I've never lost. It's all your fault. Da, 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 da. Do you have anything to say? And John's like, yeah, I got something to say, and just went right back at him, and it was awesome. And actually, I think Mike Holmgren gained an incredible amount of respect, because it was like, okay, all right, well, let's see. And then John finished that season great, gets a deal with the Bengals. You're right, some bad teams there. Did I tell you how they tried to bench him and then bench him again? And like Dick LeBeau called him in. It's like, oh, John, I got to, and it was all financial, because he had a bonus that if he hit certain number of snaps, he was going to get a pretty significant bonus. And that's what bad organizations do. And that's what they were at that time. And then sure enough, they tried to start like Achille. He gets hurt in the first quarter. John plays the rest of the snaps. Next week gets called in again. Yeah, we're going to bench you for Scott Mitchell. Like, he breaks his hand. John plays the rest of the snaps, gets his bonus, and then another like 10, 12 years in the league. So yeah, he was super accurate. The common denominator between Damon Huard's 12 years, Ryan Fitzpatrick's 20 years, John Kitna's 16 years. If you throw on time and you throw on target, you can stick around in the NFL for a long, long time, and he certainly did.
That's an interesting dynamic with Holmgren and John Kitna. I can't even imagine if you went back to Holmgren's first opportunity as a head coach in Green Bay, when you had what was deemed a wild Brett Favre, and I'm not talking about on the field, I'm talking about off the field. And I just wonder, have you heard any of those great stories behind the scene? Because Brett Favre seems like a guy that would challenge you as well.
Oh, yeah, and that is where, the McCarthys and the Andy Reids and those guys came so much into play, and that staff in Green Bay was just a remarkable kind of who's who in the coaching world. Yeah, and Hasselbeck was there, my other buddy, and he was there for some of that in the later years there. But yeah, the amount of cover that those assistants had to do, and the buffer at times. But ultimately, it's the same thing. Like, John was a great competitor, and I think Mike, in some way, just wanted to pull the rest of that out, and did. And in Green Bay, certainly, yeah, Holmgren pulled his hair out, and like, I can't believe Favre was doing this, and he's untrustworthy, and yada yada yada. But he was an unbelievable competitor, which totally, obviously, cut through.
Maybe back in the 70s, you could get through 10 weeks of the NFL season and say, look, I feel like I know who's going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, who's going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. Maybe over the last few years, easy to say Kansas City. But I brought this up with your colleague earlier, Joel Klatt, and I said, I think it's really interesting that the college is much more unpredictable this year than the NFL. I almost feel like I can tell you, if Lamar stays healthy, Baltimore is going to be that team in the AFC. And I hate to say it, but I mean, Detroit seems head and shoulders above everybody in the NFC.
Yeah, and I think the line of scrimmage matters an awful lot, and is really kind of the, you said earlier, as we were talking in the college game, about the offensive lines and the line of scrimmage and how challenged they are, and some of the supply, and all of a sudden Ohio State doesn't have 10 5-star offensive linemen, or 4 stars, because those backups over the previous years are now starters elsewhere, and didn't want to just sit there and wait and rot for 2 or 3 years. Let me go play elsewhere. So been a little bit more level on the playing field, maybe not great in, superior lines, but in the NFL, Detroit's offensive line is great and is superior. Kansas City's offensive line, Baltimore's offensive line, great and superior. Philly's offensive line, great and superior. Washington, I think, has done a nice job on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and got a totally elite, athletic, dynamic, young rookie quarterback. So yeah, I think in some degree, and maybe I'm totally biased on this because I see the difference. I see a Seattle team that's got a bunch of other nice pieces, my Seahawks. But if you are that bad on the offensive line and you cannot communicate stunts in the most basic of stunts, and you let rookies, multiple rookies for the Rams and second-year players totally dominate you, totally humiliate you, totally laugh in your face, then you know what, Houston? We got a problem. And there's a bunch of O-lines in this league at the NFL level that have significant issues.
Well, look, and since you brought it up, we can go to that game because I do want to get into the NFC West and where that division is right now as a whole. But watching the Rams, and I think this is one of the things that is so great about Les Snead and his ability to just evaluate talent late in a draft. And even into that first round, I was one of those guys, I was like, if the Rams can somehow get Brock Bowers, best player left in the draft up until that point, this offense is going to be unstoppable when everyone's healthy. Now, Brock Bowers comes off Antonio Pierce. Not that they needed Brock Bowers. They need a lot. So I think most people were shocked the Raiders took him. But then the Rams take Jared Verse. And I liked Verse. He was one of, we did a little thing, top 5 guys that we think will make immediate impacts. Verse was one of my guys. But back to Snead, Kobe Turner out of Wake Forest, Byron Young, who really didn't do much at Tennessee, and now you go out and you get a Verse and a Braden Fisk that played together last year at Florida State. Those 4 guys alone, the motors don't stop, Brock, and those guys are on first and second year contracts. That's how, with a Matt Stafford healthy, that's how you win a championship.
No question about it. And that is how you have to sustain when you're paying him. And Aaron Donald's still on the books, and Cooper Kupp's getting paid, right? I mean, when you pay your top tier guys, then you have to hit on these first, second, and third round picks. And then if there's a bonus and icing on the cake and a cherry on top is some of those late rounders. But I think we're realizing maybe how big a deal Fisk and Verse were down in Tallahassee. Yeah. That maybe it's not all DJ Uiagalelei and as rough as it was for him, that maybe having just game records at the NFL level on your college team went a long ways towards their undefeated season or whatever it was down in Tallahassee last year. Yeah, those guys are really, really good. And they're not Aaron Donald. Nobody is Aaron Donald. But by kind of addition and adding all those young, hungry pieces together, man, they have resurrected their season. That NFC West is wide, wide, wide open.
Dan Orlovsky joins us every Thursday, and he said last week, I still think if the Rams
are the who's who.
We try, man.
The cat's meow.
It's all quarterbacks.
Platt on Monday and Orlovsky on Thursday.
It's just the intelligence of that position. We make sure that we try to rotate you guys as much as possible. He said, though, I believe if the Rams can get healthy or stay where they are right now, I think that they win the NFC West. I mean, it's 5-4 Cardinals, 4-4 Rams and 49ers, and 4-5 your Seahawks. I don't think Seattle with that offensive line is going to be able to do anything. I just don't. Mike McDonald, not that there was a huge expectation in year one. They've looked really good at times, and they've looked really bad at times. San Francisco, when they get McCaffrey back, they should be okay, but they don't seem as good as they've been. I'm starting to believe this Cardinals team, I've got a really good friend that's a Cardinals fan, and I texted him, and I was like, I would trade Cooper Kupp straight up for Trey McBride right now. I don't know if that sounds crazy, but I think the Cardinals got these little pieces like James Conner and Trey McBride, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be fantastic. Kyler Murray's not having to do a lot, and they're still winning games. If you had to guess right now who wins the West, what direction do you go?
Yeah, I still give the lean to San Francisco just because of that overall roster. I think Shanahan is really, really good. I think McCaffrey is that difference maker. That's not just one player, right? He's a running back. He's a wide receiver. He's a slot receiver. He's just a dude that is when right and when healthy. And maybe he doesn't get that way. We'll see. Coming off of the bye week, all expectations are that he will return, but I kind of want to see that before I kind of stamp it. But I think Orlovsky and myself and Klatt would probably all agree that you trust Matthew Stafford the most. Right. And he showed it yesterday. He was hit. He was harassed. I thought the Seahawks put together their best defensive game plan in a long time and got after him. And what does he do? I'll just dump the ball. I'll just throw it away. No sacks, no negative plays. And I'm just going to dump it and I'll get rid of it. And we'll live to play another play. And over the course of a game, you know what? When the game's on the line and we're in overtime and 2nd and 6, McVay is going to trust me to go in this sucker and put the sword in him and the dagger in him. So, yeah, that guy's arm is still elite. I think his brain, along with McVay and those two tied together, is special. And if McCaffrey does not come back, I would trust a Stafford a whole lot more than I would a Murray, an Arizona organization that has just not garnered that kind of respect.
Over the last few years, me and my son Jack, I mean, it's one of the things we do. We watch the Rams together, and I'll say obvious things like, this is a massive third down. We really need to force a turnover in this situation. You and Titus sitting there, and your son again, freshman in high school. He's the backup quarterback right now on the varsity. He's playing JV. I've seen some highlights. He has got tremendous upside. But as a former guy that played the position and now a father of a guy that is still learning the game, when you sit back and you're like, what Geno just did right there, you don't do. Or what Stafford did right there, you do. Do you guys have the technical in-depth conversations?
We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there when he's not doing homework or, got all of his ladies on his Snapchat and all that ridiculous stuff. With his,
hey, does it wear you out? I mean, my kid is like, and it's like it's guarded. He doesn't have a privacy screen, which he's not getting. But I'm like, who do you like? It can't be this important. And I can tell it's Snapchat the majority of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a get-together Saturday night, and this family had a big old swimming pool and hot tub. And I don't know, they were like 30 kids, freshmen and sophomore. And Molly sent me the picture of my wife. She's like, this is not good. I'm like, no, this is not. This is just. And I zoomed in, not on my Titus, thankfully, but on a couple of these other boys whose eyes were wandering. I'm like, this is not a good idea. Get them out of the hot tub and get them out of the pool. I'm getting old, but no, we're getting there. We have some of those absolutely fun discussions. We'll do it tonight with Mahomes. We'll watch him and just, kind of pause the game before the moment. And what do you think? And we've had multiple times this year, Lance, with, Will Howard at Oregon, Nico at Tennessee, like in those moments down in distance, you just got to slow the game. And this is what separates. When we talk about QB processors, it's not just post-snap. It's processing the game ahead of the snap, right? It is knowing how valuable those points are, Geno, and knowing how much your O-line struggles. So when you get in the red zone, you cannot take that risk. That Carson Beck, that Beck governor that we were talking about earlier, like that governor's got to be on. And this team needs those points. So it is fun to start to have those conversations with a freshman that is starting to fall in love with the game.
There were only 2 early games yesterday in the NFL I had any interest in, and it was obviously because it was picks that I gave out. And one of those was Denver and Baltimore, and the other was Miami and Buffalo, which ended up being a tremendous game. And Tua's playing really good football since he's come back from the concussion. Mm-hmm. But I heard this morning, watching Josh Allen, he is just a frustrating guy if you are rooting against him because he makes crazy, physical plays that I don't think anybody else can possibly make just because of his size and strength. But I heard Rex Ryan describe him as maybe the best red zone quarterback he's ever seen. I mean, that's a high bar, but, you get caught up in the moment. Watching him in the red zone, though, his ability to improvise, like the throw that he made yesterday going down to a tight end where, I don't even the visibility of that guy was completely blind. It was just an incredible play. But Josh Allen, as soon as I say the Ravens are the best team, and they did lose to Cleveland and Jameis last week, I do believe they're the best team in the AFC. But Buffalo is going to be a tough out anytime they've got Josh Allen.
Yeah, that's a good point by Rex. And as I'm kind of rattling through different guys through the years, I am reminded last year of sitting down with Steve Sarkisian. And we had them a couple times. I had them early in the year, I had them late in the year. And he did this really deep dive into red zone offense because there were some areas there, and this would have been in 22, that Texas really struggled. And third down situation and the red zone in particular was a real bugaboo. And he studied it, and he looked at all the great red zone offenses all across college football and even into the NFL. And he kind of documented the familiar, which is your ability to run, right? Ultimately that's the best. If you can move people and it's an even box and you can run, then you're going to have sustained red zone success. But the most important one, and kind of the big asterisk, was a creative quarterback. That typically, because the field shrinks and shortens, there's only a certain catalog of the number of plays, the number of defenses you see, everything gets simplified. So as a QB, you do have to create when it is not there on time. You got the whole length of the field, Lance, lots of different windows. I can throw a slant in the first window. I can throw a slant in the second window, not in the red zone. All that space is so condensed, and I don't have deep routes, and I don't threaten people over the top, and I don't create this separation through route concepts and stretching the field. So you have to have somebody that can create, that can extend. And then when you've got the velocity on the arm and the fastball he has, Very few in the history of the game have had that. Very few have been 6'5", 250 pounds. Very few. I remember when he came out of school, I believe it was Carson Palmer's brother that was training both him and Deshaun. And he's like, dude, he's faster than Deshaun Watson. Like his 10 and his 20. Like this dude is so fast. So you throw all those things together, other than the turnovers, right? I mean, that's been some of the kryptonite is some of the turnovers, trying to do too much. When he doesn't do that, and he's not doing it this year, with just two picks all season, yeah, the dude is pretty darn good, and especially in those situations.
I will get more of an in-depth answer from you next week, but you've been around this guy. Got to give him credit, Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. I mean, they're sitting at 5-3. They're 3 losses to division leaders and the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Cardinals, and all really tight games. In 1 minute, what makes Jim Harbaugh such a good coach to be able to do it at the collegiate level and the NFL?
Because at San Diego, at Stanford, at Michigan, with the 49ers, and now with the Chargers, no matter where he has been, he has built a system and a culture and a scheme that moves their opponent against their will. To move another man against his will. He's done it everywhere, including a really soft Stanford program that he inherited, and just imposed his will and his belief. And that physical presence at the point of attack has carried everywhere he's been. And it's doing the same right now in Los Angeles.
Well, you think about it. They now in 5 consecutive games have given up 17 or less. I mean, the defense, it was one of those things coming into it. Maybe Herbert can carry them, but now the defense is playing well. I think the Chargers, sneaky good team. He is Fox's Brock Huard. We do this every single week. It is brought to you, unlocked is by mybookie.ag. Again, they're going to double the initial deposit. All you got to do is put in that code word next round. Double the initial deposit at mybookie.ag. Always great stuff. Where will you be on the call this week?
This week, I will be with the Buffaloes down in Lubbock, Texas. Colorado, big one. Going to be just a jam-packed big noon kickoff's going to be in Lubbock. It's going to be electric. And, if they get this one, look out for the Buffaloes down the stretch.
Lay the points. They always play well in front of Brock. It's been unlocked right here on Disrupt. Like, subscribe, and share.